Hey, good morning, everyone. I'll be with you shortly. Um, Today, we're going to be taking a look at the that announcement that came out between Russia and China and their energy deal, and how a lot of speculation went on as to what it may mean down the road. But what's interesting is if you take a look at their history, the past, basically USSR and or basically Soviet-Sino relations, it's kind of telling as to what we may be looking at ahead. So I think it's a good topic. We'll also be taking a look at the past Dr. Stephen Lieb interview, Gerald Salente interview. We'll be going over a few things from Twitter, current events as well. And I hope to see you guys. I'll be with you in about a minute or so. And we'll get it going from there. Hope your team is doing well in the Super Bowl. I forgot today was Super Bowl Sunday, but I'll be with you guys shortly. Hello again, everyone. Thank you for joining. This is another edition of Silver Bullion Television, SBTV. I'm your host, Patrick Vieira. This is our live stream. And again, glad you all could be here. Take a look at the quick roll call, see who's here. Tony, how you been? Tony, it's been a while. Yes, Vladimir is Putin, Biden in his place. All right. Carrie Ellen Wilder, how you doing, ma'am? Hugs, hugs, hugs. Thank you for being here. MM 126, the nursing home. I'm not quite there yet, but not sure what you mean by that, but I'm not quite there yet. Mark the Silver Shark, hi, Silver Shark, how you doing? Mr. Nguyen, how you doing? Haven't seen you in a while. Good evening. So again, it is Super Bowl Sunday over in the States. Forgot about that. So well, not really expecting a big crowd, but we'll see how it goes anyway. So as mentioned, the main topic is really going to be coming off of that announcement between Russia and China, and again, there were a lot of reactions to it, a lot of emotions I saw go into it. So I wanted to, kind of take a look at it. And what I found is if you really want to understand it and what it might mean, you got to go back in history a bit and take a look at USSR Sino relations, because I think it all pretty much, that's the backdrop for it. It all pretty much is built or comes out of that relationship. So we'll be taking a look at it in the main topic. So again, thank you all for being here. I do appreciate it. Ronald Bryan, watching you and the game. Hey, all right. That makes me feel better. Okay, first time I've seen your name here, Ronald. If you are new, go ahead, type in new and where you're from, and we'll see if we can go ahead and acknowledge you. And if you have a question, go ahead and type in a Q, capital Q, and then let us know what your question is. And if I see it, I'll try and answer it. If Vincent sees it, he'll try and answer it. Vincent is here as well. Good morning, Vincent. He'll be helping me out through the live stream with the questions and comments. So again, Vincent, appreciate you being here. So as always, if it is your first time here, please do go ahead and subscribe. Hit that bell to be notified, and thumbs ups are always appreciated. You can always find us on social media. Silverbullion.com.sg is our website. Yes, we do sell gold, silver, platinum, palladium. Yes, we do have storage and things like that. Uh, but more than anything else, we do specialize in systemic wealth protection. So I do hope that, hang on here. So I do hope that, if you have questions about where we are in the world, systemic wealth protection, things like that, absolutely do send us an email, sales@silverbullion.com.sg, and we'll walk you through it. We'll see what we can do for you, and if there is a fit, and how we can help you through these times. Silver Bullion SG is where you can find us on Facebook. Silver Bullion PL is where you can find us on Twitter, PL for Private Limited, Instagram at Silver Bullion SG, audio versions only, bit.ly/SBTV iTunes or /SBTV Spotify, and Crisis Tracker. Please do join this Crisis Tracker group. It is from Telegram, so if you have that Telegram app, either for your mobile phone or on your desktop, go ahead and search Crisis Tracker, one word, and there you will find posts from Vincent and I as we go through news articles and we see something that may have some meaning, whether it's to economy, finance, gold, silver, things like that. We'll go ahead and post it. So do join that group. As I always say, we go through a lot of weeds just to try and find the things that may mean something to you. So go ahead and join that group. Again, appreciate you guys being here. Pablo, go Bengals and Truckers. Yeah, absolutely. Patrick Bateman, how are you doing? Jay Delaney, Rolf Steiner. Rolf Steiner, how are you doing? Let me see. Um, okay, that's a pretty interesting comment. Pretty interesting comment then. China will send combat troops to help Russia against any USA attack on Russia. That tells you a lot. We'll take a look at that. I don't, unless that's more updated news than what I've seen. I haven't been in the news for a few hours, so maybe that's something more updated. But we're gonna get to the crux of all these things. I guarantee you. There, Chuck Diesel, how you doing? Absolutely, absolutely. No matter what happens, we're all in this together, gang. For sure, for sure. We're here. We're here to lean on each other, support each other. We're also here to be truthful with each other. Sometimes we hear things we don't want to hear, but still, we got to know truth, right? That's how we can best make our decisions. And we don't want to be like the other guys that they call MSM, because we don't want to we don't want to give you guys one-sided narratives. We want to give two sides and every side as much as possible. So, yes, as Vincent said, do join our Crisis Tracker group, t.me/Crisis Tracker. So, if you have that Telegram app, go ahead and join us there. Upcoming guest, pretty interesting. I think you folks will know these gentlemen. One of them being Rob Keents, editor and publisher of goldsilverpros.com. Rob's premium quarterly newsletter emphasizes long-term cycle investing in the precious metals markets. He's also the author of that 2010 book, Drop Shadow, The Truth About the Economy. And his work has been featured on Yahoo Finance, Market Watch, Seeking Alpha, Gold Seek, and Silver Doctors, among others. Second guest coming up is going to be Lawrence Lepard of Equity Management Associates. I do believe he's going to be the next one up. Lawrence founded Equity Management Associates back in 2006, otherwise known as EMA. EMA is an equity investment management firm that invests in growing private and public companies located around the world. Since 2008, EMA has focused on investing in companies which mine the monetary metals, gold and silver. Larry, otherwise known as, I think I prefer to call him Lawrence though, presently serves on the board of directors of two development stage gold mining companies, Amarillo Gold Corp, Toronto, Brazil, and Rise Gold Corp over in California. So I do hope you subscribe and hit that bell so you can be notified when these two interviews go up. I know Rob is pretty active in Twitter. Rob Keens, that is, from Gold Silver Pros. He's doing tremendous work. He's doing really, really great work out there. And Lawrence, he's doing great work out there as well. So two popular guys out in the Twitter sphere, anyway, among other things. So do hope again that you'll sign up and be notified when these interviews are up. So let's see. Jay Delaney, yes, Rob, he's very good. He knows almost every topic, every area that you want to go into. He's well versed in just about all of these areas. Mr. Nguyen, thank you, appreciate that. Um, okay, let's see what else is out there. Average Homer, I enjoy listening to Lepard. You know, it's gonna be my first time having a chat with him. So I gotta dig in. I gotta dig in and get the research going with Lawrence and see where his strong points are in order to best help all of us out and give us the best info that's out there. So again, Lawrence Lepard and Rob Keens coming up, and we'll be giving away our ebook thank you or our $10 gift card thank you from Amazon, which it is going to be $10 Amazon gift cards for our winners. Rules to the game, and the answer is going to come from the Stephen Lieb, Dr. Stephen Lieb interview. So hope you had a chance to watch it. Be one of the first five to answer correctly in this live stream. You're going to have about a minute and 30 seconds. And then US winners, we're going to give you a link. If you're outside of US, you may have to contact Amazon if in case that gift card does not work for you. And you're going to have to provide us an email during this live stream. So yeah, hopefully everyone has an anonymous email, right? I mean, where it's like just for all the junk and spam, maybe for $10 Amazon gift cards as well. Who knows? But so anyway, those are the rules. But we can be a bit flexible. So let's move on to the question. Let's move on to the question coming from the Dr. Stephen Lieb interview. Question is, according to Dr. Stephen Lieb, we've got to put in motion what China has put in motion with respect to these blank. Two words. I can tell you they both start with the letter S, but two words might be a little bit tough here. So, according to Dr. Stephen Lieb, we've got to put in motion what China has put in motion with respect to these blank. So, you got about a minute and so left. So, go ahead and take a guess. Just take a stab at it. Average Homer, yes, the part is decent. He doesn't pretend. He doesn't pretend to know more than he does, like most people do. So Lawrence Lepard, yeah, much respect to him. Eyes on precious metals, yes. Truth Monster, digital currencies, okay. So answers are starting to roll in. So we've got to put in motion what China has put in motion with respect to these blank. So two words, I can tell you they both start with the letter S. So digital currencies, good guess. Fiat currency, good guess. So got a few more seconds here. You can go ahead and take a MM126. All right. So go ahead, just take a stab at it. If you don't get it, it's okay. Maybe a consolation prize. Your pool will win for the Super Bowl or something else, and maybe you'll get a bigger prize than a $10 gift card. But go ahead and take a guess at it. Human rights, okay. Um, yeah, okay. So no one, excuse me, no one got it. Secret societies, okay. No one got it, but the answer there, social score close. The answer was sustainable society. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and take a look. We'll revisit the Dr. Stephen Lieb interview and see exactly what he had to say. Hey, good guesses, by the way, but this is what Dr. Lieb had to say.
I'm not worried about China's debt. I'm much more worried about our debt because, we've got to figure out a way of putting in motion what China has put in motion with respect to these sustainable society. They're way ahead in electric vehicles. Tesla was a relatively small worldwide company until they entered China. I think Tesla's gone up maybe 20 times since it entered China. It was a successful company, but they became a huge company entering China because China, again, wasn't trying to keep the American out who had all the good ideas. They bring them on, make cars in China and sell them to the rest of the world because it will help China in the long run. Tesla, Elon Musk is a really good example of, I think, China's attitude.
Okay. I know it's controversial. People may think and agree with his opinion, and other people may not agree with his opinion, but it's okay. We're all adults, right? We can all have opinions and discuss things and not get into crazy arguments, right? So Dr. Stephen Lee is not worried about China's debt. He's worried about the U.S. debt. And he says Tesla was a small company until it went to China. It found growth by going into China. And China's welcome to American businesses. Want to know your thoughts? Want to know your thoughts on that? Open to or welcome to businesses. Want to know your thoughts on that? And as you're putting them in the comment section, I'll play another clip from our Dr. Stephen Lee interview.
A sovereign currency should never be the reserve currency. The reserve currency for the world should be a basket of currencies because you don't want one country's political aims to interfere with another country's political aims, and it should be backed by a commodity. And the only commodity that would fit the bill would be gold. We need a currency that is going to represent everybody. It has to be disciplined. Anybody looking at the US right now doesn't see a trace of discipline in terms of how we're managing it. You cannot run a world if you can print much more money than there are things to buy. An infinite amount of dollars is not going to buy a finite amount of commodities. It just won't happen. If this world is going to thrive, the dollar as we know it has to die.
This world is going to thrive. The dollar as we know it has to die. Pretty profound statement there. Sovereign currency should never be the world currency. Then let's make it gold. Let's make it gold. Should be a basket of currencies. And interestingly enough, there are countries that do have a basket of currencies. For instance, Singapore has a weighted basket of currencies. Even look at the SDR. SDR is made up of the euro, the pound, US dollar, Japanese yen, Chinese yuan, and even gold. So there is or are ways to use baskets of different types of things, including commodities. And Dr. Lieb does say it should be backed by a commodity. Only commodity that would fit is gold. So I'd like to know your thoughts on that as well. Let me take a look at a few comments here. Um, let's see. Ralph Steiner. Rolf Steiner, the USA hates gold. I don't think US hates gold, but definitely the politicians do. Every time there's a bill that comes through Congress asking about sound money or putting the idea of gold in sound money, no, you just don't get any support. It's just consistently the one or two guys out there who try and get these bills started, but just never really gets through. Maybe we should talk to JP Cortez on that. He knows quite a bit more about it. Let's see. Harold B. Gold worked for thousands of years. Absolutely. I think it worked until those in charge decided, hey, there's more in it for us if we get rid of gold and we can give free things to people and not have to worry about paying for it, and they'll vote us back in, and we can have a career out of this. So it's been like that forever. It's been like that for a very, very long time. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll play one more clip from Dr. Stephen Lieb and his interview with us.
Almost every problem America has faced in the last 40 or 50 years have been problems that could be cured by money spending. You could spend your way out of virtually every problem that we had. We now are facing a problem that you cannot spend your way out of. And the only way to manage a problem like that is with the kind of discipline that the gold standard has imposed on us. And my evidence is so simple. The 70 best years of the American enterprise, the American, experience have been the 70 years that the gold standard has basically been the underlying monetary system of this country. And I don't know why people don't see that. I'm not just talking about the years after the Second World War. I'm again talking about the years after the Civil War. They were the years of greatest prosperity in this country. Why don't we see that?
Right, Dr. Stephen Lieb. For the last 50 years, we could spend our way out of every problem, and that has always been the solution. Fire up the printing press, right? We need gold standard discipline. We just don't have it. I keep going back to this, but our politicians, they just don't have it. They're more concerned about their own well-being and getting reelected and giving us all this free stuff, and we enjoy it and we take it, and we don't have any idea that all of these things need to be paid back. So it's a good point there. The 70 best years of American enterprise was when it was on a gold standard. I'd have to agree with him. What are your thoughts on this? Let me go ahead and take a look at a few of the comments here as we go on. Um, let's see. Mr. Nguyen, either end the Fed or revalue the dollar to gold to make us competitive in the export business. True, true. And one of the key words you just mentioned there, export business. Um, that is critically true, and that's something we may touch on a bit later. We may touch on a bit later. Uh, Standing mannequin, prosperity is not in the cards. Standing mannequin, all right. Prosperity is not in the cards. The way things are going, no, you can't spend your way to prosperity. People have said this time and time again. So absolutely, absolutely. I'll move on to Gerald Salente. A few cuts from his interview. Keep the comments coming in. You guys are always great for opening up topics and having discussions. So keep the comments coming in, and I'll roll three clips from our past Gerald Salente interview.
Inflation is destroying the people. The lying bankster freak scum, they had the bullshit out that, when inflation, whether it's the ECB or the USSA, when inflation rates hits over 2%, that's our line for raising interest rates. And interest rates are going up. It's only temporary. It's only transitory. They know it's real. The reason they didn't raise them is because they don't want to bring down the fake markets and stop all the cheap money coming in so the bigs could get bigger and keep buying up everything. So now they're going to raise interest rates. And this thing's going to bring the economy down hard. What may save it for a while is that you're going to start seeing countries loosening up. Already they're doing it. And our forecast going back to January 1st was that the COVID war is going to wind down the end of March, mid-April. So what they're going to do is they're going to raise interest rates dramatically. Things are going to go down, but you don't feel it right away. And then it's going to go up because there's going to be a boost when they lift these sanctions. And that's going to artificially seem like it's propping it up. But this thing's going to go down big, it's going to go down hard, and it's going to go down heavy.
All right. It's always good to have a chat with Gerald. Inflation is destroying people. Powell has not been truthful. Guys, we've known Powell has not been truthful from the very start. Go back to when the repo market broke, 2019. What did he say? Corporate was getting ready to file their taxes. That's what he told us, something along those lines. You go back to 2019, Powell has never been truthful with us. Don't fall for it. You got to go back to 2019. He's never been truthful. Raising rates will bring the economy down hard. What are your thoughts on that? If they raise the rates, what do you see? What do you see happening? I think we saw the bond market, 10-year bond, hit 2%. I think it even went slightly above 2%. And we saw things start to unravel a bit. We saw gold shoot up some $30 an ounce, I believe it was. So, market's very fragile. And any bit of news or narratives, it's going to push the market. Fundamentals are just not there. It's whatever the mouthpiece people, Fed or whoever else says, that's going to push the market. Seems like fundamentals are just not there anymore. More from Gerald Salente.
They did this back in the 1980s to kill inflation. What they did was they dramatically raised interest rates, and then before the presidential election in 1984, they dramatically lowered them, and the economy jumped up. There was a 1992 election when Bill Clinton was running. The campaign theme behind the scenes was, "It's the economy, stupid." In other words, that's all the people care about. And he pretended to be he was going to save the economy. And that is what they're going to do again. The banksters are running the country. The Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, is the former head of the Federal Reserve. How stupid can anybody be to see who is not in charge of the country? The former head of the Federal Reserve, a private banking corporation, is now the Treasury Secretary of the United States. So they're going to keep power. What they're going to do is they're going to raise rates, and then the game is, whether or not it plays out properly, they'll dramatically lower them prior to the 2024 elections. So 2024 is looking like 1984.
All right. It's the economy, stupid. We've heard that for a while. We've heard it for a while. Raise rates have to be lowered before the presidential election, meaning if rates are going to be raised, they're going to have to come back down for the presidential election. Banksters are running the country. Who is not in charge of the country was what Gerald said. I didn't catch that till after I watched it again, where he said who is not in charge of the country. So that was that's a great point there. And the other point he brought up was when you look at Yellen, she was the head of the Fed. Now she's a Treasury Secretary. Only one other time in history did this happen. And no surprise here, that time in history, I think it was during Carter's time. And we saw inflation run. we saw inflation run so much that eventually Volcker had to raise interest rates up to some 18 or 20% to try and calm down inflation. So we've already had an ex-Fed chairman serve as Secretary of the Treasury, and that's what happened. Inflation ran. It ran and ran and ran. And here we are again. Yellen is there. History is repeating itself. As I always say, nothing new under the sun, guys. Nothing new at all under the sun. Another clip from Gerald Celente.
As they're raising interest rates, it's going to cost more to service that debt. The whole thing is a fraud in front of everybody's eyes. They just keep printing up this money backed by nothing and printed on nothing. And it's just one big scam going on in front of our eyes in a country near you. I mean, take a look at Turkey. How many more times do they have to lower interest rates, and how much higher does inflation has to go? It's one criminal activity after another in a country near you. What people have to get in their heads is that these aren't governments, they're crime syndicates.
All right, they're not governments, they are crime syndicates. Let me know your thoughts on that. Let me know your thoughts on that. And I'm going to move over to a couple, three things that I pulled from Gerald Salente's most recent Trends Journal. His weekly message. I think I'll start including that weekly message and then maybe just a couple topics. So two of them, one of them being bounce back and the second one being China tightens ties. So we'll go ahead and take a look at Gerald's message. The majority wanted war. Welcome to this week's Trends Journal. COVID-19 made in China is what Gerald titled it. And yes, the bug, be it made by scientists, one theory, or made by bats, the other theory, it was made in China. That's what Gerald says. And just as China quickly imposed draconian mandates on its people, which the communist nation does whenever it wishes, the Chinese way became the way of the world. We move on here. Constitutions, have been shredded and human rights demolished by national, state, and city leaders who have taken full control over citizens, telling them what they must do, what they can, or when they can do it, and what they must inject into their bodies to fight the bug. And as we detail in this and previous Trends journals, their battle plans have killed millions and more lives and livelihoods than the bug itself has killed people. On the geopolitical front, we provide a great detail how Barack Obama's administration provoked the Ukraine civil war and Syrian war, and how Obama's Vice President Joe Biden, who supported those wars back then, is ramping them up again. Economically, it's all about interest rates. How high will they go? What will it mean and what to do? It's all in your Trends Journal, plus Trends in Technocracy, High Tech Science, and much more. And for those of you guys, Salente, he's a political atheist. He will bash the left. He will bash the right. He will call it as he sees it. So don't take it as he's left leaning or right leaning. Bounce back. Factory orders fall the most since April of 2020. New orders for U.S. factory made goods fell 0.4% in January, the largest month-to-month decline since April of 2020 at the start of the bug, the U.S. Commerce Department reported. The consensus among economists was for a 0.2% slip, only half the recorded slide. Meanwhile, the cost of U.S. made goods climbed 0.5% in December, excluding food and energy expenses, the U.S. Labor Department said. The cost for processed materials that factories use, minus the cost of food and energy, which some consider a more accurate measure of producer price gains, was up 0.7%. So let me ask you something here. If the cost of raw materials and labor are going up, how then do you produce anything that is competitive? And production is important. Manufacturing is important because if having more goods in the supply chain helps to bring down inflation, then the U.S. will not be able to help the supply chain simply because you can't compete. And that was something that Mr. Nguyen had brought up. It seems to me if more manufacturing will be outsourced to beef up supply to bring down inflation, then wouldn't that mean the U.S. is set to lose more and more manufacturing jobs and become more dependent for simple household goods to maintain a quality of life? This is important. Moving on, China tightens ties with Iraq. So while the U.S. has been ending its military and political entanglement in Iraq, China has quietly been extending its influence there by funding 10.5 billion in new construction projects in 2021. Now, this part is interesting because typically, and when I get to the Russia-China relation or USSR-Sino relations, typically China did not go into the Middle East. Typically, the Middle East was Russia's territory. So this is interesting with this, and we'll have to see how this unfolds. But the initiative is part of China's strong shift to attention to the Middle East, even as it pairs or parries back investments in other parts of the world, according to a report by the Green Finance and Development Center at Shanghai's Fudan University. Nation's 5 year plan to 2025 cuts capital investments in foreign countries by a third, from 740 billion to 550 billion, but will boost spending in Arab and Middle East nations by 360%, largely in energy and transportation projects, according to the Financial Times. And China's new attention to OPEC's second largest oil producer comes as Mideast countries see the U.S. as becoming less engaged in the region. FT reported there's a vacuum now, and it's going to be filled. Under the Biden administration, the U.S. ended its combat missions in Iraq and abandoned Afghanistan after a messy exit. China imports most of its oil from the Mideast, and in return, the region is buying a larger share of its technology from China. Iraq is China's third largest oil supplier. Much of China's investment there has gone to rebuild failing infrastructure after decades of war and the West's reluctance to invest in a country still rife with political instability. Now, China's state-owned Sinotech and Power Construction Corporation of China have agreed to build 1,000 schools in Iraq, which will pay for them with revenue from oil exports to China. And other Chinese Iraqi projects include building a heavy oil power plant, restoring the Mansouriya gas field, and rebuilding Nasriya's airport. And so there you go. That's going to wrap up the guest visits and the look at the Salente's Trends Journal. We'll be moving on to our website here. So I want to take a look at the comments real quick. Yes, Brandon is not in charge. Jay Delaney, yes, Turkey wants the people to turn in their gold for the currency. I need to take a look at that. I fell behind on that. So many things to look through, but go ahead and let us know what you found or what you've heard with that. I know it's big news. Let's see what else is here. Um, let's see. Take a look at comments. Um, okay. All right. Let me move on. You guys are doing interesting comments. You guys are doing pretty good. Aren't you watching the Super Bowl? All right. Let me move on. Sorry about that. Silver Bullion, our website, silverbullion.com.sg. Right now, let's take a look. Silver 2380 USD. Gold is 1859 and 33 cents USD. So I think both metals have gotten a little bump up. So that's a good thing there. We take a look at the silver to gold ratio. We see it at 78.1. So still kind of hovering around that 80. Would be nice to see it get back down in the low 70s. Better yet, it's in the high 60s. So that would be a good thing. But again, our website here, you can use alternative means to go ahead and buy your metals. That's been key. We've seen a lot of people do that. Some of our featured products, the main staples: gold maple, silver eagles, gold kilo bars, 1,000-ounce LBMA bars, 100-gram. These are pretty popular as well, 100-gram gold bars. And we do sell nickel. I'm not sure if you've been hearing, but there's so much EV news lately, electric vehicle news lately, and nickel is one of the key components for the batteries in electric vehicles. So if you can see the future ahead, electric vehicles are going to be there. Nickel is one of the key components in the batteries. So if you want to get price exposure by having nickel, and this is physical nickel, it's not ETFs or anything like that, you can go ahead and take a look at getting some nickel. Other popular bars, anyway, or silver items is the LBMA bar. I go over this week after week because you can see that we are well stocked. We have 272 bars. You can buy it and go ahead and put it directly in the vault, or if you want, you can bring a trolley down to our shop in Singapore and you can pick it up and take it home. It is a heavy guy. But these are the most popular because if you're looking at the premiums, these have the lowest premium. So a lot of guys who buy silver, they choose to go ahead and get these bars. If you want to store it in our vault, remember you will own it. And because you're going to own it, sign up as a silver bullion user. Six different ways, six different accounts: personal account, joint account, trust accounts, IRA accounts, and business accounts, joint account with the minor, precious metals, IRA accounts. So typically, I look at the personal account because it's the easiest. You just need an ID and fill out the application, preferably a passport as your ID. Basic information, just basically your name, what country you're in, your preferred currency. And that is because if you choose to sell it, we can go ahead and wire the money back to you in your preferred currency to your preferred bank account. Username, password, again, basic info here. References, do go ahead and let them know it's YouTube or SBTV. That helps us out a lot. So do the thumbs up. So do the subscribes. We gotta let the algos know that if you want more content from us, go ahead and uh and let the algos know that you want to see more of our work here. So hopefully we're doing a good job for you. And I would take this receive customer notifications via encrypted secure notification. This is simply that if we do need to contact you, we're just going to send you an email saying you have a notification from us. We don't put anything in the body of the email that it's not going to, algos won't be able to to decipher what our conversations are. And again, open up the account. It is free. There are no maintenance fees, and it's all about options. I think things are starting to get heated up again, so we are going to need options. And trust me, we have a lot of options. So just contact us, sales at silverbullion.com.sg, or open up that account. And again, there are things like P2P loans, which you can basically use your silver and gold as collateral to go ahead and take out a loan against what you have. It's not a leasing program. You still own your metal, but it's a way to go ahead and use your metal as collateral, get a loan, and go ahead and redeploy some of your assets. So this is something we do that I don't believe really anyone else does. And it's also the reason why we check everything that comes in our vault. Make sure that your gold is gold, your silver is silver. So we'll go ahead and get that done for you as well. So moving on to Twitter, something happened with my Twitter. I mean, they keep fooling around with things. The I don't get to see the main ones that I usually see. So I'm not sure what's going on with Twitter again. Um, yeah, even my bookmarks, I put things on bookmarks, but they just didn't show up. I don't know why. Elliot Martin, all tyrannies rule through fraud and force. But once the fraud is exposed, they must rely exclusively on force. That is true. We're seeing it. We are seeing that. Let me see. Uh, Chris Martinson talking about early treatment. That is true. And then things are just. I personally don't understand how you do this. How you go ahead and indiscriminately just you know tear up the place with tear gas and whatnot. Look at that, kids and all. Granny, grandpa, kids. You know what? Why? What did they do? What they do that was so bad? Let's see. The man known as Coos Johnson, but will go by Jan Neuenhaus. Hi, Elon. Was wondering if your company Tesla has bought gold yet. Us too, or even silver. Elon, are you out there? Risk on assets. Stocks and cryptos look fragile, and gold seems to move in the opposite direction. Hope to hear from you. JP Cortez, imagine telling poor people that were already struggling to afford rent, foods, meds, transport, etc., that prices going up caused by reckless monetary mismanagement by the Fed and the government, and their subsequent inability to afford those basic needs is their own fault. Their own fault. It's your fault. If you can't handle it, it's your fault. That's basically what some people feel. Um, I find it amazing how the loss of empathy has taken over. Lynette Zhang, are we headed to war? Got gold, hold it, own it. U.S. orders most troop diplomats to leave Ukraine. This is always one of the moves that a government will use. Bring the guys from the embassy back home, bring your government workers back home. It's still a move on the chessboard, to let your opponent know, you know you're getting close to calling their bluff, or whatever it may be. So it's just a step. It's a common step that goes on. It's not anything, well, I shouldn't say it's not anything to worry about, but it's a common step that goes on. Dan Collins, you pay up to DNC families, you get protection. So he was looking at this chart here where Ukraine has paid over 10 million to the Clinton Foundation, and so here we are. They're Well, you guys know the story. No point looking at this anymore. I think some people coin it as pay to play, but here we are. Here we are again. Lauren Boston, as yields keep rising due to inflation and in anticipation of the Fed's rate hike, look for equities to keep weakening. Sooner or later, investors will figure out that it does not make sense to be in bonds, equities, or cash for the next few years. Very true. And Peter Schiff, I'll end it here. Peter Schiff, to successfully fight inflation, the government must eliminate the $3 trillion annual budget deficit. It can do this with middle class tax hikes, cuts to the middle class entitlement, or a combination of both. Then the Fed can reduce the money supply and raise interest rates. So that was a look at Twitter. I can't see any politician coming out and saying this. They're not going to do it. So I think, Peter's just kind of poking people here, poking politicians and whatnot. They're not going to do it. Or even if they do it, it can't be really anything significant, unless these guys are really planning to leave office. Then you may see that, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. So I'll take a look at a few comments out there before we get on to the topic of the day. All right, let's see what's out there. Chuck Diesel, they'll get the lead before they get the gold. Okay, I saw Carrie Ellen. You had a comment, something along those lines as well. A lot of people getting angry. I do know that a lot of people are getting angry. Last living old cowboy, face it, guys. We, the USA, are now the bad guys. Now the bad guys. You know, it's the sad thing is, if you talk to the average person in the states, not the ones that are put on mainstream media, but if you talk to the average person in the U.S., not really a bad guy. It's the government, the politicians that are giving us bad diplomacy, that are leading us down the wrong paths. And these guys aren't stupid. They know exactly what they're doing, and I see it as it is willfully being done. These guys aren't stupid, and there's such a disconnect right now between the average person and what government is doing. And then you have the other, the other batch that mainstream media likes to pull out and tries to convince you that this is how everyone thinks, and it's a battle. It's really a battle right now. Won't get too much into that, otherwise I'm going to get stuck on it. So let's see. Yeah, Ralph Signer, thanks for the guest recommendation. We'll go ahead and take a look at that. Um, let's see. Um, okay, yeah, we're talking about the nickel. These are class two nickel sold in 250-kilogram drums or 2-ton bags held in an LME warehouse. Gives investors direct investments in the nickel price apart from futures or mining stocks. Let me leave that up. Yeah, this is talking about that nickel because if you look at nickel price, it's been going up. It's been doing pretty good. And again, the world is switching over to electric vehicles, whether we like it or not. That's where they're going to go. And a big part of that electric vehicle, of course, is the battery. The biggest part of the battery by weight is nickel. Before there used to be I think like a 1 to 6 to 6 ratio where it was, one part lithium, 6 parts cobalt, 6 parts nickel, or something like that. 1 part cobalt. I forget what it was. But the nickel percentage has gone up. The batteries are more nickel now. So they are using more and more nickel. And um, when you look at the numbers, there's really the demand is outstripping the supply uh, easily. Easily, the demand is outstripping the supply. So nickel, it's take a look at it. I mean, due diligence, of course, but take a look at nickel. So let me move on. That was a look at Twitter. Let me move on to the topic of the day. Let me see time check. Okay, topic of the day. Here we go. It's going to be a seatbelt one, gang. We're going to get on that bus, so buckle up, okay? The China-Russia energy agreement, it is a challenge to the petrodollar. It is a challenge to the U.S. dollar, the world's reserve currency. It's more fuel to the NATO, Ukraine, Russia, China, Taiwan situation, and another step towards de-dollarization. Should we worry? Should we cheer? As mentioned, a lot of guys see the U.S. as the bad guy right now, so you got to imagine a lot of people are cheering, okay? Or should you first understand the dynamics of the former Sino-Soviet relations to understand what a China-Russia relation may entail? And this is important. So going back, we first saw this. This, I believe, was in December. Let me make it a little bit larger. Okay. All right. They're scolding us here. This is your last free article this month. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. China, Russia eyes supercharged energy ties as a shield against the U.S. And this came out in December last year, December 18, 2021. So, I mean, this has been cooking for quite a while. Russia and China appear to be making headway toward a new gas pipeline that analysts say would help both countries hedge against growing tensions with the West. So on Wednesday, or this is back then, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping held a video call in which they presented a united front on issues ranging from the U.S. led AUKUS partnership, the Biden administration's recent summit of democracies, and NATO's expansion to the east. Yuri Ushakov, Putin's foreign policy advisor, said the leaders also spoke about the power of Siberia, the Siberia 2 project, a proposed mega pipeline through Mongolia that could deliver up to 50 billion cubic meters of Russian gas to China annually. So just one day later, Putin hosted the Mongolian president, Mr. UK, at the Kremlin to discuss the progress being made on power of Siberia 2, among other issues. Now, afterward, the Russian president told reporters that the pipeline's optimal route, length, and other parameters had already been determined and that its feasibility study would be completed in the next several weeks. Although Moscow and Beijing have to still agree on the pricing for the power of Siberia 2 before construction can begin, industry watchers told Nikkei Asia that the two sides look to be closing in on a deal. Again, remember, this was mid-December. They predict that the long-awaited pipeline will not only significantly boost Russian gas exports to China, which has faced severe energy shortages this year, but will also reduce Moscow's dependence on European markets and Beijing's reliance on maritime routes controlled by U.S. warships. Okay. And then we saw this. This was in December, and then we saw this a couple weeks ago. Russia and China unveil a pact against America and the West. So let me see if I can get down there. Hey, cool hats. Anyway, let me make this a bit larger as well, so we can see how all of this started unfolding. So in their matching mob ties, Russia's Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping last week declared, or this was a couple weeks ago, declared a new era in the global order, and at least in the short term, endorsed their respective territorial ambitions in the Ukraine and Taiwan. The world's two most powerful autocrats unveiled a sweeping long-term agreement that also challenges the U.S. as a global power, NATO as a cornerstone of international security, and liberal democracy as a model for the world. Friendship between the two states has no limits, they vowed in their communique released after the two leaders met on the eve of the Winter Olympics. This is key, there are no forbidden areas of cooperation. And this is going to be challenged when we look at the history of these two countries. This is definitely going to be challenged. So let me just move on here. Last paragraph. Agreements between Moscow and Beijing included the Treaty of Friendship in 2001, have traditionally been laden with lofty, if vague, rhetoric that faded into forgotten history. Okay, so in fact, let me stop there. Let me stop there. The Treaty of Friendship. This is something that happened throughout history. I believe in the 50s it might have been, but so this news came out. 2021 they were already talking about this, probably even before. 2022, just a couple weeks ago, they make the agreement, and then we had all these analysts come out, and I just want to show you what at least one analyst said about this agreement.
I think that the statement that Putin and Xi Jinping issued is important, and in retrospect, several years hence might look like a real milestone. For all the reasons that Sam just mentioned in a very good summary, this came very close to being the announcement of a quasi-alliance between China and Russia. China has a long-standing non-alliance policy, so they don't want to use the word ally. Russia doesn't want to be a poor younger brother in an alliance, so they avoid that too. But they're really standing shoulder to shoulder to counter the United States in a move which, if it came from the other side, China would certainly characterize as coming from a Cold War mentality. But they are now closer together than ever, probably than for the past 70 years, and this will have implications in Europe as well as in Asia.
What then will that quasi-alliance look like in practical terms, Robert? I mean, as you say, the relationship there is not one in which they're going to just jump into bed together and declare themselves allies. So what do you think the practical outcomes of that will be? And do you think that the fact that they are now at this position is a consequence of the kind of pressure they've both been under, or is there something else behind it?
Well, as you suggest, their alignment is not complete. Russia still sells arms to Vietnam and to India. It has not yet supported all of China's moves in the South China Sea. China has never approved of China's invasion and occupation of Crimea, which violates a number of diplomatic principles that China holds very dear. But China has really pledged that it is going to be with Russia on the Ukraine question and on the non-expansion of NATO. In terms of how this plays out, I think the important question is Xi Jinping going to be dragged into the Ukraine situation by the brinksmanship and bellicosity of Putin? That's probably not in Xi's interest. Or can China moderate some of Putin's behavior and perhaps get him in a more Chinese manner to not cease his provocations altogether, but not to cross in and to invade Ukraine. So which of these two men who have very common interests, but very different diplomatic styles and some different goals, which of them is going to dominate in terms of the way Ukraine plays out? That's the big question in the short term.
Okay, excuse me. So two very strong men. Question is, can they share power? I mean, I refer back to this time and time again. You look at when two companies merge, the two CEOs, how long do they share power? Not very long. One of them is going to take over, or they will bring someone else from the outside to take over as both men step down. Having dual power rarely, if never, works, never lasts. So two very strong men, can they share power? To get to that point, we have to look at the linchpin that will trigger unimaginable yet unavoidable things. And that linchpin is the absence of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. Not only will the absence of the USD as the world's reserve currency be at hand, the existence of the US, a superpower, for the time being, will probably be no more as well. Although, let me ask you, was the US as a superpower back in the 80s, maybe even back in the 90s, greater than the US being a superpower of the 2000s or until present day? Is it the same? Is it the same? To go further, does the world even think of the US as being a superpower? And that's really the question right there. Is it a superpower? Is it a country trying to remain grabbing power as it knows it's transitioning downward as other countries are going upward. So it's a question we've got to ask. But being that if it's not the superpower it once was, the US does indeed have the ability to put up a good fight via symmetric or asymmetric warfare. Hence the China Russia coalition on energy. But what does history tell us about Russia Sino relations, or let's call it Soviet Sino relations, because that's where the history really is? And how deep are they, and what are traditional boundaries and even hands off? Which is why when that statement came out that there are no there are no limits, I I disagree. There are definitely going to be limits. I think it's just a bit of rhetoric as to what was being said to show the unification of the two countries. So, I know this is getting pretty interesting here. In modern times, we start with World War II and then the Cold War that many of us grew up in. It was the US and the USSR, but often forgotten in the shadows of the Cold War was China and the remnants of World War II. Here we go.
Hostilities in China did not end in 1945 simply because the Second World War ended. The Chinese Civil War between Chiang Kai-shek and Kuomintang's nationalists and Mao Zedong's communists resumed. The war had been suspended so they could both jointly fight the Japanese, but certainly wasn't resolved. With support from Stalin, the communist forces gained the upper hand and by 1949 had effective control over mainland China, pushing the nationalists to Taiwan.
Okay, so after World War II, which ended in 45, China was fighting internally. In 49, the USSR's Stalin helped the Chinese Communist forces to defeat the Chinese nationalists and push them out to Taiwan. Hence, this is why the separation between China and Taiwan today. Okay, so let's move on now, and we go to 1950. And in fact, I just want to throw this in. I think it was Nixon. Remember, he had that whole triangle type of a deal where the U.S., China, Russia. He would play Russia to go against China. He would play China to go against Russia. Well, it's kind of turned now. You have China and Russia going against the U.S. So this is kind of backfired. But going on until 1950. So let's move on here.
In 1950, the People's Republic of China and the Soviet Union signed the Treaty of Friendship, Alliance, and Mutual Assistance, bringing the already close nations even closer together. As part of the treaty, the Soviets agreed to return Soviet-held assets such as Port Arthur, that's modern-day Dalian, and the Chinese Eastern Railway, which were handed over to Chinese control. The treaty also arranged for a $300 million loan from the Soviets to the Chinese to help stabilize and rebuild the country that had been ravaged by over a decade of war. In exchange for this, Mao agreed to recognize the full independence of Mongolia. 1950 also saw China, with Soviet encouragement, provide assistance and support to North Korea. This began as weapons and advisors, but ended up in direct Chinese troop participation in Korea after China felt its geographic integrity being threatened by the rapid advance of UN troops towards the Yalu River. Soviet assistance helped support China's first five-year plan, launched in 1953. The first five-year plan had goals to increase centrally planned industry and agriculture.
Okay, so in 50, Mao and Stalin safeguarded the national interest of China and the Soviet Union with the Treaty of Friendship, okay, the Treaty of Friendship, Alliance, and Mutual Assistance. The treaty improved the two countries' geopolitical relationship on political, military, and economic levels. Stalin's largesse to Mao included a loan for $300 million in military aid should Japan attack the PRC, and the transfer of the Chinese Eastern Railway in Manchuria, Port Arthur, and Dalian to Chinese control, and in return the PRC recognized the independence of the Mongolian People's Republic. Despite the favorable terms, the Treaty of Socialist Friendship included the PRC in the geopolitical hegemony of the USSR, but unlike governments of the Soviet satellite states in Eastern Europe, the USSR did not control Mao's government. In 6 years, the great differences between the Soviet and Chinese interpretations and applications of Marxism-Leninism voided the Sino-Soviet Treaty of Friendship. So you can see, even though the ideology was the same, communism, each country had their own things going on, their own, what was important to one country may not be as important to the other, and what is important to the other might be detrimental to the other. So they left that treaty expire. Here's what happened.
We know that there's an ideological divide between the Soviets and the Chinese. But while Stalin was in power, this divide was actually not a big deal. Mao had no problems accepting Stalin as the global leader of the communist world. Which naturally leads us to the question, what happens when Stalin dies? Well, immediately, nothing changed. It wasn't until after the secret speech that changes began to happen. With Khrushchev's denunciation of Stalin in the Soviet Union came experimentation in reforms in other communist nations, including, of course, China. Although he had reservations regarding de-Stalinization, recognizing that all communist countries were more or less ruled by some form of repressive means, Mao implemented the 100 Flowers campaign, encouraging people, especially intellectuals, to openly express their thoughts and opinions on the situation in China. To quote Mao, "The policy of letting 100 flowers bloom and 100 schools of thought contend is designed to promote the flourishing of the arts and the progress of science." Mao's concerns, however, were quickly proven to be correct, and the flood of letters that arrived, openly critical of the regime and its policies, led to the 100 Flowers campaign being shut down by June 1957, replaced by the Anti-Rightist campaign. The Anti-Rightist campaign was designed to find and remove members of the Communist Party who were right-wing. As to what that actually meant, that varied in practice and was applied to those who were critical of the party, to those in favor of implementing capitalist reforms, to those who opposed agricultural collectivization. This campaign, suspiciously close to a Stalinist purge in its nature, lasted until 1959, and over 500,000 people found themselves being persecuted as a result. Keep in mind that this was happening at the same time that people who had been persecuted in the Soviet Union for the same beliefs were being rehabilitated.
Now, the split between the USSR and China, I gotta say, it sounds exactly like what's happening in the US right now. The ideologies are different, and indeed, just as the purge happened in both the USSR and in China, you guys, we're kind of seeing that happening in the US. We're seeing it happening in things like cancel culture. We're seeing it happening with censorship in places here, like YouTube, like Twitter, where we are seeing it. And that it can be another topic for another day. But ideologically, although both nations are communist, they split. So let me move on.
The shared path these two nations had been on was beginning to diverge, with several issues pushing them apart. Khrushchev's position on seeking peaceful coexistence with the West was met as an almost betrayal of the communist cause in China. While Moscow had concerns about the possible effects of nuclear standoff, Beijing was embracing the idea of the inevitable war that was to be waged. As part of this, Moscow had to cut off the vast majority of its support to the Chinese nuclear program, started in 1955, ironically heavily aided by the Soviets. Not only was Khrushchev concerned about Mao's more cavalier attitude towards the use of nuclear weapons, but he was using the promise of ending Soviet support for Chinese nuclear weapons as leverage to help further a rapprochement with Eisenhower. Keep in mind that even with the ending of support from the Soviet Union, China joined the nuclear club in 1964.
Okay, so the USSR wanted to have relations with the West, and Mao didn't like this. Mao felt a war would be inevitable. That's one thing that always sticks. Mao felt a war would be inevitable, and those who study Mao, like Mao, have him in the back of his mind as a ruler. Without question, this is something that sticks as well. So the USSR wasn't looking for war. and they cut off supporting China's nuclear ambitions to fight the West. Today, China does have nuclear weapons to fight the West on their own. And this is important because if ideologies do once again combine, and they are with this agreement of the energy deal here, what then does Russia have to impair China should they feel the need to put the brakes on China as in the past, which was how they stopped supporting the nuclear program? And likewise, what does China have to impair Russia should China feel a break in the ideology and not want to get sucked into Russian affairs? For now, though, the US and the West are pushing the two countries together ideologically, economically, and even militarily.
An alliance with a powerful actor is never safe. Russia and China may no longer share a common philosophy, but the invisible hand of geopolitics is driving the two together nonetheless. Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping are playing a game of brinkmanship that has the scale to topple the American unipolarity. According to the Worldwide Threat Assessment in 2019, Russia and China are more aligned at any point since the mid-1950s. Commercial ties have strengthened significantly, and there is growing talk of military cooperation, with some officials hinting at an official military pact. But how feasible is the China-Russia alliance? Can it last? And if so, who would make for the senior partner? The definition of an alliance can be construed in many ways. The classical explanation is the balance of power theory, which describes an alliance as a mutual expectation between multiple states that they will have each other's support in disputes or armed conflicts. An alliance is formed when two or more states share a common adversary and are incapable of increasing their power independently. So they combine their resources to survive. For Russia and China, that common adversary is the United States. After 3 decades of unopposed American dominance, the Russians and the Chinese have come to feel increasingly anxious. By their own actions, with Russia focusing around Eastern Europe and the Middle East, and China moving deeper into the Asia-Pacific battlespace, they've placed themselves in the crosshairs of the Pentagon. Taken separately, the Chinese and the Russians would struggle to prevail against the United States and its vast network of allies. But together, Moscow and Beijing would dominate much of Eurasia, as imagined by the heartland theory that characterized the Cold War. An alliance between China and Russia, where the economic influence of the former is combined with the diplomatic and military weight of the latter, would produce a pact that would rival the West for global supremacy. The two complement each other's strengths.
Okay, so let me move on here. Okay, depending on your personal beliefs, you are either cheering for this or having deep concerns about this. So I want to ask what are your thoughts so far? Let me see where I'm at right now. If I kind of scroll through this, yeah, okay, I kind of went through this already. Um, okay, so I'm curious, what are your thoughts here? As I've said, some people are worrying about this, and some people they're kind of cheering. Some people feel, hey, this is long overdue. Things need to change, and when the agreement first came out, and there was so much emotion that was tied into it. I thought best to let's run this, show the history of the two countries, and more importantly, we got to understand that as much as the media has us fixated on what's going on in the Ukraine or in Taiwan or between Russia, China, this and that, we got to remember the problem comes from the U.S. dollar, things like that, weaponizing the U.S. dollar. So you know you got to keep your head on a swivel. I mean, we understand what's going on in Russia, China, all these places, but the main point of the problem comes back to the U.S. and the U.S. dollar. So don't get to don't be sucked into too much of the rhetoric there. The problem is within the U.S., the government, politicians, the Federal Reserve, the printing of the money. That's where the problem lies. Anyway, let me move on here.
In December 2020, a poll conducted by China's Global Times showed that more than half of the Chinese view Russia as the most important country in foreign policy, while an earlier poll by the US-based Pew Research Center in December 2019 showed that 71% of Russians hold favorable opinions of China, the highest ratio in the world. Clearly, with the public and the political elite on the same page, there is plenty of room to expand relations. It is that confidence that allowed for cooperation into the military sphere. In 2018, during Russia's large-scale Vostok exercise, China provided 3,200 of the 300,000 troops involved. It was an impressive display of brute force alongside the Sea of Japan, and it served as a preview of the power of the Chinese-Russian pact. So, why hasn't an alliance already happened? What's keeping Moscow and Beijing from signing a binding treaty? The answer is in the striking disparities between the two. Although military pairs, at the moment, Russia's military spending has fallen well behind. Take the annual budget of 2017 as an example. While China made the largest absolute increase in military spending globally, Russia went into the opposite direction and made the largest decrease. Military spending-wise, China dwarfs Russia by more than $52 billion. At the same time, Chinese scientists are reverse engineering high-tech Russian weaponry at an astonishing rate. In some military domains, China has even surpassed their Russian counterparts. It is clear that in time, the Russian military will subordinate to China.
Will subordinate to China. Strong words there. So, okay, here again lies the problem. Despite the snapshot in time where the two countries can serve their individual interests by standing together against the common adversary, their sovereign influence and power, especially for Russia, would be on the clock. That clock would start ticking, probably already is. In the game of geopolitics, you are playing many chess games all at once. Putin knows this. Putin knows at some point in time, as the Xi, only one can lead. One is going to become the subordinate to the other. So as Carrie Ellen Wilder said, the U.S. is dispatched, then there may be the divorce after that. I mean, who knows? We don't know the future, but we definitely are seeing the past and how the past was between USSR and Russia. I think we can, or USSR and China, I should say. I think we can get a good view as to what it would be with Russia and China. So moving on, another clip.
In addition to the nuclear issue, Khrushchev and Mao failed to reach agreement during a 1958 visit to Beijing. Up for discussion was the establishment of a joint naval base on the Chinese coast, the Soviets maintaining the Russian tradition of searching for a warm water port with easy access to the open ocean. The discussion soured after Mao accused Khrushchev of trying to take over the Chinese coastline. Mao's unilateral decision in August of that same year to attack Taiwan in an effort to dislodge the Kuomintang added even more strain to the frayed relationship. Khrushchev was worried the Soviet Union would be dragged into a shooting conflict with the West. The Soviet foreign minister, Andrei Gromyko, was sent to Beijing to encourage the Chinese to halt their attack, but he was largely ignored. The Chinese only ceased their attack after it became clear they could not win against the US-backed Taiwanese. So, the relationship is strained.
Okay, so historically, there is an uneasy trust with the two countries. And we cannot forget each country has its own goals, needs, wants, internal conflicts, external conflicts. And you simply do not want to get tangled up in problems that you don't have to be tangled up in. You don't want to be dragged into your friends' problems, right? None of us like that. You know, we might like the gossip about it, but we don't want to get caught up in our friends' problems. Okay, so that's key. That's something to remember there. Let me play one more clip here. I think this is going to be the last clip.
The next piece of the straw on the camel's back occurred during the 1959 Tibetan uprising. The Soviets did not involve themselves in the uprising, but did offer moral support to the Tibetans, stating that they had some legitimate grievances. This may not seem like a significant action, but for two countries who were supposed to be ideologically aligned, for one to provide public support for a rebellion in the other was a massive shift. Now, 1960 saw the Soviet Union shoot down a US U-2 spy plane and its pilot, Gary Powers, captured. While a diplomatic incident was certainly created, the resolution between the US and the Soviets was rather anticlimactic, especially for the Chinese. While the Soviets and the Americans were trying to defuse the situation and avoid outright conflict, Beijing was organizing demonstrations and running a propaganda campaign calling for a Soviet military reaction to the US spying attempt. Khrushchev's refusal to respond with force was certainly met with scorn from Mao. At this point, the relationship between China and the Soviet Union was starting to look like a bad breakup. And like any breakup, the group of mutual friends was choosing sides. The Soviet Union was trying to use it as an opportunity to repair its relationship with Yugoslavia, who was an outspoken critic of China. Albania, on the other hand, still longing for a Stalinist strongman, found itself even more alienated from the Soviet Union, who stopped all financial aid. China, however, used the opportunity to step in and allow Albania to resume building bunkers. 1960 saw Khrushchev slam Mao in public, referring to him as a nationalist and an adventurist, while addressing a congress of the Romanian Communist Party. Both sides accused each other of being revisionists and deviating from Marxism. So clearly there was a significant and growing ideological gap between the two leaderships of the two nations. But there was also an underlying factor that exacerbated the situation. Mao had accepted Stalin as the global leader of the communist movement. He did not accept Khrushchev, who he viewed as a weak and unwilling to lead world revolution. Mao was positioning himself to take on this role, the champion of the communist revolutionaries around the world.
Right. So that's what I mean. When you got two guys at the top, they don't usually stay at the top together forever. That's for sure. So clearly, despite both countries being communist, each had a different ideology. I'm not sure if ideology would be the right word. They were both communist, but they had different political needs, let's say. And when you throw in their individual friends, as mentioned Yugoslavia here, they in turn also have their own ideology, their own thoughts on things. As an example, imagine Russia's friends who may be anti-US, but might be pro-human rights. They may pressure Russia to pressure China. China wouldn't like that. And there could be things vice versa as well. So do we fear or cheer a Russia-China energy agreement, knowing the history of Sino-Soviet relations? As Carrie Ellen again said, they often divorce and then friends are kind of pulled into one side or the other. But let's simply all hope and pray that our wisdom leads us and emotions leave us. Okay, let's hope and pray for wisdom here. Get rid of the emotion. Okay, we got to think clearly on things. I mean, after all, simple fact of the matter is, in all of this, the key in all of this, it's the U.S. It's the U.S. and what it's been doing for the last 20, 30 years as the sole superpower. It's definitely not the same superpower it was back in the 80s or the 90s for sure. So that's going to end the topic of the day, and I'll move over to the commentary section. But first, I want to take a look at your comments here. So, again, when this thing first came out, the news between the two, it shouldn't really have been news anyways. It was just an announcement that okay, we're open for business kind of a thing. We're open, but it shouldn't have been news because I think most of us already knew this was in the works. It was going to happen. And the main thing, or the biggest thing in all of this, again, goes back to the US and the USD. I mean, if we were not in the club and we were on the outside, we would be looking at that as well. We may be doing the same things that Russia and China are having to do as well. But it goes back to their relationship. They get together, they break apart. They get together, they break apart. And this time it's different because if they get together, Russia's the clock is ticking on Russia, and as I said, I think Putin knows that. And who do you have in charge after? Who's after the U.S. is really broken down and Russia is a subordinate? World's going to change. It's definitely going to be a change. Some people may welcome the change. Excuse me. Some people may not. Anyway, comments here. Let me take a look at this. Let me take a look. Let's see. Let's see. Mr. Nguyen, exactly. It requires funding, and this is important because it goes back to the gold standard. When you had that gold standard, funding a war was difficult, and it meant politicians had to do their job. They had to do their job and negotiate, hopefully be peaceful, be friendly with other nations. Take away the gold standard and print money at will, becomes very, very easy to finance a war. Very, very easy to finance a war. So that's a good point there. Um, yeah, Mr. Nguyen, again, stack gold and silver, absolutely, because again, this is all about money. It's or currency, I should say. It's all about that and weaponizing that currency, and this is what it is. They basically want economic freedom. Um, I who wouldn't, right? So again, before we look at for U.S. guys anyway, that includes me. Before we look at any other country, we got to take a look at ourselves first and what we're doing. I mean, I have the benefit of being in Singapore, being in Asia, so I see it two ways. I have to take a look in the mirror of what my own country is doing, and then I'm also in Singapore, so I see the results of what the U.S. does. So it's you really got to take a look at all sides. Um, let's see. Mark the Silver Shark. All the people get along. Everybody gets along. It's NATO propaganda. Okay, okay. I like that. I like that. Let's see what else is out there. Um, Ralph Steiner, let the U.S. keep throwing hundreds of billions into NATO. No one else is. Ralph, when you go back to in history, though, when you look at Nixon, that was one of the reasons why he closed the gold window because he felt the U.S. was supporting NATO and Europe too much, or Europe. I'm not sure if NATO was formed. NATO was formed. The U.S. was giving more than their fair share. Europe wasn't really contributing to their own defense in so many ways, and so the U.S. couldn't do it anymore. And so that was one of the reasons why they closed the gold window. And it's one of those things we often forget. We think Nixon was just some bad guy. Closed the gold window, this and that. But there were reasons why he did it. I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying there were reasons why he did it. Take a look at a few more comments here. Um, okay, let's see. Uh, Harold B. Absolutely, our tax dollars, our pocket change in Washington. I mean, you guys have said it before. Why do we even pay taxes? I mean, seems like we can give money to so many different, organizations or whatever it may be. It seems to be money for them, but yet, not for the citizens. I mean, why do we have to pay taxes? Just print up your own money, print your own money up, and pay yourself. Why not? Isn't that how the bonds work? So anyway, let's see what else is out here. Um, let's see. Mark the Silver Shark. I think an ugly day for stock market tomorrow. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I mean, I'm interested to see what's going to happen with the excuse me, the bonds. I was looking at a message came in. Um, I wish I could share that message that came in, but sorry guys. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I'm interested to see what's going to happen with gold and silver as well. I mean, I think bond market, like I said, went up to over 2%, came back down, but we saw gold move some $30. So I'm interested to see how it's going to open up in the U.S. What else is out there? In fact, let me take a quick look at what the prices are right now. Silver 23.71, gold is at 18.54. Okay, so let me move over to commentary section here. So, again, when I saw that announcement between Russia and China, I thought this is present trouble for the U.S. and the West, and then I also thought this is future trouble down the road for Russia and China because of the way their relationships tend to go. And going back to the word alliance, remember when that gentleman he had the pencil underline the word alliance. When I said, what do these two countries have to put the brakes on one another should they go too far? China economically can put the brakes on Russia if it goes too far, where Russia's ambitions do not align with China's ambitions. And Russia, they can pull the plug on the energy deal that they signed, the very energy deal that was signed and agreed to. They can pull the brakes using that energy deal. So there are outs for the two countries should they need them. They may not necessarily have to do the whole pact, the whole alliance, because each country definitely wants its own sovereignty, and each of them can stop each other if need be. U.S. can't. Unfortunately, the U.S. is the adversary to both. So the only countries that can stop them is one another, and that's just the way. That's just the way it's going to be. Trust is such a huge thing. So history tells us the Sino-Soviet relation, let's say, or the Sino-Russia relationship never lasts. Putin and Xi surely know this, and now you know it, I know it. So should we really fear the energy deal and what may happen down the road, or is the energy deal, as true as it is, another way to the U.S. urge the U.S. to control itself and correct what is going on with policies surrounding their world reserve currency and having it be a weapon of class destruction? Isn't that what most of us want here as well? Anyway, correct? Isn't that what most of us want here? So it kind of goes back to Gerald Celente with what he had to say earlier when we were looking at his trends journal. Um, it is. I found this kind of interesting. Sorry, I had to drag you guys into it. Sorry, a lot of thoughts going on in my head, but nothing to. Let's not fear this, because the thing is, it does come down to the U.S. That is perhaps what we should fear, or what we should take control of, because this is the fuel to the fire of everything going on right now. Anyway, let me take a look at your comments. Sorry, guys, a lot of stuff running through my head right now. Um, okay. Harold, is that true? Emergency Fed meeting at 11 a.m. Is that really going on, or well, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Um, okay. Rob, the fact Putin and Xi have installed themselves permanently gives them an advantage over the U.S. They can both pursue their longer term visions, where the U.S. continual electoral cycles don't help. That's a good point, because, as I've said before, how is it possible that you can have a congressman be in there for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, but yet the president can only stay there for four? How is that possible? How do you expect a president, which the people are voting for, to ever get his job done if he's dealing with congressmen, entrenched politicians who obviously have other interests? It's not going to work, and it's been seen that it doesn't work. It's just not working there. So, you know, term limits. Term limits is probably a good thing. Um, Chuck Diesel, that's exactly the point. I think China wants to be the leader and Russia will be second fiddle. And that's kind of the thing. When you look at the relationship, um, they're on equal ground right now, but, in the back of their minds, they know what's going on. They know that I may have to be a subordinate to the other, or they know that, I will eventually be the leader over that country, or the leader of the ideology or whatever it is. They know that. They exactly know that is what's going on. So there's more than what we see. Um, let's see. Michael Cole, when is the collapse? Well, I think in Cincinnati the collapse started about an hour ago. I think in LA they're still doing fine. So when is the collapse? Good question. I wish I knew. I wish I know. All we know is it is happening. Um, it's happening now, really, if you think about it. Slow collapse, like they say that frog in boiling water, kind of a bit. It's happening. So let's see what else is out there. Um, Ralph Steiner, USA has to hurdle over the edge now. It's a great learning lesson. Nations grow out of extreme pain. That's true. It's a great point. It's a great point there. Let me take a look at a few more comments and I'll let you guys head out. Truth Monster, US dollars dying a gruesome death. Absolutely. And that is why get yourself some gold, get yourself some silver because that shiny stuff is going to help you out when that gruesome death of that dollar starts to happen. So, or it actually is happening. So, great point there. Great point. A couple more comments, and then we'll head out. Mr. Nguyen, perfect. Ideology is dead. Common sense needs to reign. Absolutely. You know the hard part about that though, with all the narratives going out there, it just doesn't allow for common sense. You know, people watch it, they get caught up on it, and they forget what is common sense. They're unable to think for themselves. As Gerald Celente says, you got to think for yourself, right? So that's a great point here. One more comment, and we'll head out here. Yeah, let's just mark the silver shark. Let's just see what Jerome says tomorrow. Let's see what he says tomorrow. So that'll pretty much end the commentary part and all. Oops, wrong camera there. So anyway, let me move on here. Hang on, guys. I kind of lost something here. Um, okay, so that'll kind of. Oh, sorry, wrap things up. Something's not working right here. But again, appreciate the time that you've spent with me here. Um, I look forward to doing this again with you folks. And you know, as I always say, be a blessing, not a burden. There are a lot of things going on in the world. We all can see it already. Do what you can. Be there for your friends, your family. Family, of course, comes first. And you know, as I always say, a lot of people are going to need a lot of help. Silver and gold are things that can help you. It's not financial advice or anything. It's just me sharing what I'm doing. If in case not if in case, but currencies will go down. That's for sure. It always goes down. But be a blessing, not a burden. And as I always say, saddle up for what's coming ahead and silver up as well. I'll see you guys in a couple weeks or less. Who knows? And again, subscribe. Rob Keen's coming up. And then we have Lawrence Lepard. So I'll see you guys soon. Take care of each other. God bless.